Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I'm super excited to announce that on January 5th, I'm going to be freely gifting each of you my very first book, The Golden Key: Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. In the book, which was initially shown to me in a dream and has been followed by a next level amount of synchronicity, by the way, I share the keys to manifesting abundance that I've personally discovered over 20 plus years of trial, error, and deep exploration of these perspectives, as well as one golden key that ultimately ties them all together. Also, I would like to invite you to participate in a unique abundance manifestation experiment with me and the other readers that is outlined in detail at the end of the book and at the book's website, goldenkey.gift, where readers will also share the inspiring results of their abundance manifestation experiments. So if you're wanting 2021 to be the year that you alchemize the circumstances in your life so that your abundance expands to an entirely new level, head over to goldenkey.gift to sign up to accept my golden gift right when it comes out on January 5th. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Jeremy Abramson here with me on the show. Jeremy is a transformational coach helping to drop knowledge on the masses through his almost, 250,000 TikTok followers, Jeremy? You're doing it, man.
We should actually hit 250,000 today.
Wow. Okay, perfect. So 250,000, we hit that impressive benchmark. You're also the Chief Engineer Officer and host of the Thrive University podcast. Super happy to have you here. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. And you know, most people go by the Chief Executive Officer, and I go by the Chief Energy Officer because
I like it.
Because as you know, this human experience is all about energy and exchanging energy. So that's really what I want to embody every single day.
Beautiful. I love it. It makes me think back to years ago. I used Chief Visionary Officer for a while, but energy is even, it's everything. I say the number one thing we're all here to do is manage our vibration, so that's a good one. I like it. And it's still CEO, right?
Exactly. I actually like yours too, though. I think that's someone I should bring onto the team as CVO.
Yeah. I think I want to say, this is a long time ago. I used that for a minute, and it was, I think originally Steve Jobs used it. Maybe I heard it somewhere. I can't recall, but I have to look that up. But all right, we're getting ahead of ourselves because I try not to go too far down the conversation rabbit hole without my very cliche opening question. And it is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Oof, that is powerful. And that's not cliche at all. Depending on how fast that elevator moves, really, really what I'm here to do, my calling is to empower and inspire others to tap into their full potential. And I think that sentence pretty much sums it up. And just to kind of go deeper into that, and I know you talk about a lot of this with your community, is we have all of these blockages in areas of interference that are preventing us from fully stepping into our power and potential. And I get so much joy and fulfillment out of helping people gain the awareness to identify those certain blockages and then overcome them. And that is, for me, really how I would sum up what I do and what brings me joy and passion.
Well, that's the Willy Wonka answer, I like to call it. When you blast past the 10 floors, And I don't know if you've seen Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory,
Yes.
where he goes into outer space in the elevator. I like Willy Wonka answers, by the way. So very cool, man. Let's dig into that. And before we do, I always like to get some context, backstory, insight, how you ended up on the path that you're on. So whatever feels relevant from your backstory to share, we'd love to hear.
Beautiful, man. Yeah, thank you for holding space and giving me the opportunity to do that. For me, really went through high school, grew up in the Bay Area near San Francisco, and never really faced any significant challenges or adversity. I would say the first roadblock that I personally faced was about 6 years ago. I was 24 and I was working my dream job with the Oakland A's baseball team. I studied sports marketing. I thought I wanted to, eventually be an owner of a team or be running a team in some capacity. And I was working for my dream organization, dating my dream girl, and then within 48 hours, all of that shit just splatted in my face. So I
Wow.
got fired from the job. And then when I called the girl I was dating to like get some comfort, it was shortly thereafter that I found out she was cheating on me and had been
Wow.
our entire relationship. So honestly, Brandon, that was the first time where I was like, oh shit, like this life thing isn't so easy. It's a little challenging at times. And basically, I responded by going to visit my good friend in South Florida, who I had actually lived in Israel with after high school. Another fun fact, I took a gap year after high school before going to college and spent 9 months in Israel just kind of exploring, studying, volunteering. And this was one of my good friends I had met on that journey. And I really fell in love with South Florida. Like I remember, and I know we're going to talk about synchronicity at some point today, but I
For
remember
sure.
specifically in July of 2014, like walking on the beach in Miami and calling my dad and being like, "Yo, Dad, I'm going to move here. Like this place is
Wow.
incredible."
Yeah.
And 2 months later, I packed up my Honda CRV and drove cross country, and then that kind of was the beginning of the last 6 years for me. And I would say I don't want to go on too much further diving deep into this backstory, but I think this would provide a little more context as well. Is for most of my life, like most people, I feel like I was unconscious of my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, and the big shift for me, the big pattern interrupt for me happened in July of 2018 when I went to Peru and I did my first ayahuasca experience there, and that just opened up so much possibility for me. And I really started to see like, oh my gosh, like I have so much power and potential that I'm not sharing with the world. And literally
Right.
like since then, Brandon, the last 2.5 years almost has just been an upward trajectory of continuing to learn, invest in myself, um, and just explore this human experience into realms that I didn't know existed prior.
Right. Wow. So I mean that's pretty fairly recent. Well, we're coming up, 3 years ish time frame, 2 to 3 years since you did Aya. Was that? Would you say that was like the big thing that cracked you open? And do you want to share a little bit about what kind of your experience was?
Definitely, definitely, brother. So it was funny because I remember I was actually supposed to go to Costa Rica on a yoga retreat that
Uh huh.
same time. And like 2 weeks before, I had just felt called to the medicine. And I heard people like Aubrey Marcus and others speak about ayahuasca and plant medicine and talking about this calling that you oftentimes feel.
Yeah.
And I literally canceled everything. Like I canceled the retreat. I don't even think I got my money back actually, now that I think about it. And I canceled the flight and I just went to Peru by myself, found like a trustworthy retreat center, did a 3-day ceremony. And basically for me, like the first night of the experience was so powerful because I really experienced the power that my voice had. And
Right.
I've always been told, like, dude, you have amazing energy, like, and all these things. And there'd be glimmers, like there'd be glimpses where I would show these things and like embody these things, but then I would go back in my shell. And I never fully stepped in to what I had been gifted. And I
Right.
just remember, people are purging around me. And I literally, again, like talking about a calling, and I know you're not really supposed to talk necessarily in like in a ceremony, but like I just like said, I basically said, like, speak, like whatever's on your mind, like just speak it up. And I started to just channel. Like, I
Wow.
wish I had a recording of this because it would be like the most powerful viral piece of content probably
Wow.
in 2020. But I
Wow.
remember just channeling for probably 5 to 10 minutes, and really, um, that's when I felt this whole sense of oneness for the first time. Like your pain is my pain, your healing is my healing, your suffering is my suffering. And
Right.
it was like after that first journey where we all kind of like were debriefing and like having like a grounding meal afterwards, where 4 or 5 of the people came up to me and they're like, bro, those words really helped me get through a challenging time, and you really helped center me and helped me get back into that surrender space, which, as you know, is so important whenever you sit down with Aya or any other plant medicine. um, and then honestly, it really shifted to the way that I approached communication, especially with my family. And I know this episode's coming out right in the midst of the holidays, and maybe you can relate to this, Brandon. And I think I've heard you talk about this, but holidays can be one of the most beautiful times of the year and also the most triggering times.
For
Uh,
sure.
because we're spending time with people who basically helped shape our subconscious mind.
Yep.
And now it's like, okay, well, I have these new skills, I have these new tools. I'm good. Like I'm good. Like I'm bulletproof. And then something they say or something they do just sets you off. It's like, oh fuck, I thought I was making progress.
Yeah,
Um,
if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family.
Exactly. So the biggest thing for me, honestly, my brother has had his fair share of struggles and battles with mental health and addiction and things like that. And he's my only brother. He's 5 years older than me. And, you know, up until then, I feel like I never I never fully acknowledged like how much it hurt that I had kind of lost, uh, in a way, my brother. Like, yeah, we still kept in
Right.
touch here and there, but it wasn't significant in my estimation. So that was the first time where like I really felt it weighing on me. And in addition to that, it also was the first time where I experienced his pain on a very
Wow.
personal level. Like I literally felt like I was him experiencing all of the depths of darkness that he had gone through. And
Wow.
it gave me a whole new perspective on the way that I approached our relationship. And I feel like up until that point, like 2.5 years ago, there's a ton of love, obviously, with my family, but it was also partly, when I look back at it, like conditional love. It
Yeah.
was like, hey, I have all these ideas on how you can be more healthy. Stop drinking this, add this, this and that. And it was coming from such a place of dogma. And
Right.
and, and as soon as I got back from that trip, like I stopped. I shifted the way I communicated to my family. It was more of a place of like compassion and love. Like, I care about you guys so much, and I want you to be as healthy as possible for your future grandchildren. And I want you to enjoy this latter half of your human experience. Um, so, for my first ceremony, that was definitely the most profound takeaway that shifted a huge trajectory for me. I mean, literally a few months after that, I started my podcast. I started teaching bigger events. I started speaking on stages. I started creating much more powerful and meaningful content. And I can really point back to that 3 day stretch. I mean, it was more than 3 days, in terms of the travel experience. I was traveling in
Sure.
Peru longer than that. And then obviously the integration, which I think doesn't get talked about enough. I've been integrating every single day since then, and,
Right.
um, and that's why I honestly didn't feel called to do the medicine again until last month, because I wanted to make sure I respected the process.
Yeah.
And yeah, brother, hopefully that answered your question
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in a very long way.
Yeah. No, it's perfect. And so, yeah, a lot of times people will just go in and then just continue, you know, ceremony after ceremony after ceremony. So I think you touched on a very important thing is like, I've done it myself. I think seven times or six times, I believe. And it's been a while. It's been a few years since the last time. And that was all spread out, over probably the last 5 or 6 years. Um, and it's so fascinating because it can be so different for different people and where you're at and how it cracks you open in the way I had that same experience where you literally start getting the experience of how much your field is connected with everyone else, you know, in the room, or in your case, you're saying you actually felt the pain of your family or your brother. And I remember really having that same sort of thing, feeling deeply into what different family members, you know, were experiencing and going through. And it's one of those things where it's like once you've sort of seen and felt that sort of experience, it changes it changes the way you interact and feel. I mean, it's just like how it's kind of like you've seen too much and you can't go back to your old ways. And I think that's one of the most powerful constants I hear from people's journeys can be so varied, but it seems like this familial element always is brought into it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, man, 100%. And, this most recent experience was also powerful. A lot of stuff came up about, a lot of stuff came up. First of all, like the first ceremony, the medicine was like diluted, so it wasn't as strong. And a lot of
Uh-huh.
people didn't actually feel it the first night. Um,
Mm.
but I had like a very subtle experience, but it
Uh-huh.
was so, dude, it was like nothing I've ever experienced in terms of the vividness of my childhood memories. Like, and
Wow.
and I don't have any like significant traumas uh
Mhm.
in comparison to many others. However, I feel like we all have some level of trauma from our childhood. And
Yep.
one of the narratives I had told myself for so long was that I'm unsupported,
Mm.
that I have to do a lot of things on my own. Like there's an imbalance in some of my relationships, like me giving more than receiving. And it was so interesting that the first night literally like went back to every single step of my life, not even just childhood, from kindergarten to first grade to all of these different levels in elementary school. And I was remembering like vivid moments with my friends from second grade during recess and like trading snacks, famous Amos cookies for Gushers. And and I realized like every single period of my life, I've had amazing support. I've had amazing friends. And it was actually me who distanced myself in many of those cases. And it was just to give the listeners like an idea of how vivid these memories were. Like I'm 30 years old now, and
Mhm.
I remembered, and I still do, which is amazing because that's what the medicine does. It like gives you access to areas that you thought were suppressed and not able to be recovered. And I remembered every single member of my sixth grade basketball team, first and last name. And it was so strange. I was like,
Wow.
it was like back in practice with them, like, hey, Aaron Hoblide, like, yo, hit me on the backdoor cut. And like it was crazy, Brandon. And then um I know I'm going down that rabbit hole that you said we'd avoid early on, but that was big for me. And then also piggybacking on that for my last, like the third journey that we did on this most recent trip was was my inability to receive from the divine
Mm,
feminine. Uh
interesting.
yeah, that's the biggest thing that came up. Like um I was basically stood up and one of the medicine women came by with, I think it was Palo Santo to bless me during ceremony. And my hands were closed, like my palms were facing down. And she said, Abre tus manos, open up your hands. And
Mm,
it just gave me like a huge mirror for my life. Like, oh my God, I've been unable to fully receive. Um,
yeah.
from, especially from the divine feminine. So it's just been a really interesting kind of journey, and I'm so grateful for these incredible tools that God has gifted us. Um, and yeah, it's been beautiful. So I'm grateful for this path and all of the lessons, no matter how challenging they've been.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you touched on something super important. It's like when you come holding your bag of sugar out to be filled, it will be examined to see how large it is. What do you feel you're worth? Are you willing to, so many people, especially in this community, are so good at giving, right? And they're so in their heart and so good at giving. And then it's like, and then and even minimizing themselves, minimizing their light, and not, allowing and realizing the importance to receive, and you're actually depleting your ability to give if you're cutting off the other side of the coin, right? It's a loop. It needs to be. It's like the toroidal field. It has to regenerate. And if you're just constantly in giving mode and you're not receiving, it's something, you know, um, I obviously in your case really helped, but you can open your eye to it. Just think. Anyone out there listening, really think to yourself, like, huh? And what is my approach to receiving? Am I, when someone tries to offer something to me, am I saying, oh, no, 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 you can't do that. No, don't buy my dinner. No, no, whatever it is, we're
Mhm.
conditioned to do that kind of stuff so much. And I remember actually seeing Tony Robbins once talk about this and how it was a huge lesson for him, realizing when someone tried to pay for a meal, I think it was, and he was trying to do that whole thing, insisting, no, 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 I got it, I got it, I got it, And he's like, look, you got to realize when you stop me from giving in a moment where I want to give to you, and you're not willing to receive, I am actually the person that's giving is, you're gypping them in a sense.
Mm.
You're robbing them of the experience of giving, and we all can, all of us who are really good at giving can relate to that side of it, how good it feels to give. So just think of it in those terms. If you want the other person to have the same experience that you're having, that's a gift in itself. So you need to receive in order to give, right?
Mm, dude, I'm so glad you touched on that. Yeah, it's so true. Like you said, it's really this cycle and it's this flow and it's this synchronicity. And when it's out of balance, you're gonna feel it. So I think it's a good opportunity, seeing that it is the end of 1 year and we're really doing our best to establish momentum going into 2021. It's a great opportunity for people to really check in with themselves and ask them, like, ask yourself, hey, how do I receive compliments? How do I receive invitations to, dinner or anything in that realm? And what I found in my experience is that it actually was relating back to my mom,
Mm.
not being able to fully receive from the divine feminine. I asked my shaman after, I was like, how can I integrate this and how can I really take action so this isn't isn't this, it isn't holding me back moving forward, because I really do want to fully receive, and I want that experience, and I want to have that beautiful kinship with the divine feminine. Um, so literally, as soon as I got back, like I had a conversation with my mom, and anyone who's listening to this who comes from an Asian background, an Indian background, or in my case, a Jewish background, you can relate to that really like nurturing, almost over nurturing mother.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
yeah, I don't know if you can
Right.
relate to that, Brandon.
I definitely can. Definitely. My mother's very similar in sort of super mom energy.
Yeah. So for me, my mom, I think the narrative my mom had been telling herself was like, if Jeremy commits to a woman and he has this love for her, it's somehow going to diminish the love he has for me.
Yeah.
And it all comes back to like this scarcity mindset, right? Like, oh, there's only
Yep.
this much love that needs to be dispersed between three people, and if she gets more, it means I don't get any. And I think a lot of us are walking around with a scarcity mindset with money, with love, and and yeah. So I had that conversation with my mom, and interestingly enough, the woman that I'm seeing, she lives in Belgium, and that's going to be a story for later in the show. But she came to visit me. Like, she came all the way from Belgium to stay with me in California for a week, and she was going to stay at my family's house with me. So I wanted things to be as comfortable and even keeled as possible. So I told my mom, I'm like, Ma, like, listen, you know, it would mean the world if like this could go smoothly, and understand that just because there's a possibility I love this woman, it doesn't diminish the love I have for you. Like that, no, nothing
Right.
could ever change that. Um, so I just think it's a good opportunity to really evaluate how we're showing up. Like, are we acting with that scarcity mindset in some way or another?
Yeah, it's really, really interesting to take, I mean, of course, there's listeners out there who had the exact opposite, right? Where they're getting no love at all from their mother. And so there's that scarcity on the other end of it, right? It's just like, it's, we're so creative. We find so many ways to create scarcity where there really isn't. And, it's, I talk about that idea of like, you saying your mother afraid of like sort of losing your affection, love, energy, attention. And it's, one of the most powerful things that's served me is realizing whatever the universe brings me in form of a relationship, friendship, financial abundance, any whatever it is that I seek to have and hold on to. I always come back to the realization that one, it's all fleeting. It's all going to fall away at some point. But the great part about that is the universe can deliver that same thing that you're craving in infinite ways, in a myriad of ways. So, anytime you find yourself holding on too tight, you know, you're really stopping the flow of energy and, not trusting trusting the mystery, right? The universe's plan. And so I think it's definitely understandable. I think, and I'm sure both our mothers would say, and a lot of mothers out there are like, oh, until you've had a child, like, you don't fully know. And of course, I do have a child. So I do get that too. It's like my biggest fear would be losing my child, right? In some way. And so that's sort of, it really touches on the most core fear that all mankind shares.
Mm, yeah, brother, for sure. And I second everything you said. Like, you really can't predict the way that some of these things flow and enter your life. And that's what's so beautiful when you're on this path, is that, yes, you and I were both committed, action oriented entrepreneurs, and we're we have big visions, right? We have big visions to make a significant impact on the planet and this collective consciousness. And with that being said, we understand there's only so much we can do ourselves. And a lot
Right.
of that is going to be from the alignment of the universe. Like when we are acting accordingly to our values and our vision, other things that are unimaginable will enter our life. And Joe Dispenza calls these like mystical experiences, or again, like synchronicities. And yeah, it's just beautiful to see how they show up in unexpected ways. But you have to be ready to receive them. It comes back to like receivership. If you're closed off and you're not open, then how do you expect to actually be able to appreciate and receive these things when they do want to penetrate your stratosphere?
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of that is getting to the core of your own worth. And yeah, I mean, so many people have a story of they're not good enough, or they don't deserve it, or they did this bad thing once and it haunts them. And it's like learning to just love yourself where you're at and realizing that you are as worthy as any other soul ever has been or could be, because it's all the same. It's all, when the puzzle pieces go back in the box after the game is over, it's this one puzzle. It's like it's all you. You are as worthy as anyone ever has been, including all of the things that you did that you're not proud of, or all of that is necessary to bring you to this moment. And so, yeah, getting into a place where you can really love yourself where you're at, and then say, okay, now I'm ready to receive. I deserve to receive. And by the way, maybe I'll start telling the story that, I can help make amends for whatever I've done that wasn't, I'm not proud of, by receiving. So I have more resources and energy to work with to help, help do good in the world. So, it's so important, the story that we're spinning around all of this stuff. And, um, you know, I couldn't believe it more fully that each and every one of us is just as worthy as the next, regardless of what their narrative has been up to this moment. Because really, we're all being born anew in the now, right now. You're literally like, this is, the past is like this illusion. The future is an illusion. It's never going to show up like you imagine. The past didn't exist like you really imagine. We certainly remember things a certain way, and so it's truly, it's why some of the most popular spiritual self-help books that have ever existed, Be Here Now and The Power of Now, are so powerful, because they're really pointing us to where we need to focus and launch off from, and quit dragging these old stories forward that keep us away from our divine right to receive and thrive. Which I love the way the name of your podcast, Thrive University, and you were telling me that it's actually an acronym for. Well, maybe you should share it. Tell us what Thrive stands for.
Yeah, brother. Thanks for asking. It's a beautiful segue. And I just to kind of touch on what you were saying, which also segues nicely into Thrive, is I was listening to your podcast. I think it was the one that went live like in the most recent week, and you
Uh huh.
finished with the Joe Dispenza meditation. And
Ah, yeah.
and Joe Dispenza, like I had the privilege of doing a live workshop with him in Colombia, actually in February of this year, 2020. And
Oh, cool.
and he said this in the meditation, and he says it all the time, is like fall in love with the future, the vision of the future, rather than the emotional chains of the past.
Mm,
And I think that is such a vivid, beautiful way to put it, because
love
literally,
that.
like so many of us are enslaved and imprisoned by things we did in the past, and it's all self-imposed. Um, so this conversation, is really one of the sources of why I was inspired to create Thrive. And like you said, Thrive is an acronym that stands for thoughts, habits, relationships, intention, vitality, and enthusiasm. And seeing that I work with a lot of high level athletes, executives, entrepreneurs, these were the 6 pillars that I really believe will create a life filled with health, happiness, fulfillment, and longevity. Because the bottom line is, Brandon, anyone can launch a podcast. Anyone can have one piece of viral content. Anyone can do these things, but how many of them can sustain that level of success like you have for 5+ years and consistently putting out, multiple shows a week? And the answer is not many, right? A lot of people can do keto and lose 20 pounds, but are they going to keep it off? Is it sustainable to their lifestyle? And I feel like a majority of people out here are just searching for magic pills. And I know your audience isn't, but most of the many people, I should say, that I encounter who are seeking my help, they want a quick fix originally. Like that's what they want. That's what they're used to in this Western medicine model. And my program, my paradigm is completely against that narrative of magic pill. It's all about empowerment and simplicity and systems. So T is for thoughts, like I mentioned. We can go into the science of thoughts about how we have up to 60,000 of them every single day. And 90% of the thoughts that we're going to both have today are the same exact thoughts we had yesterday. So,
Yeah.
And a majority of these thoughts, like we mentioned, are either ruminating in the past, right? Rear view mirror syndrome, or we are perpetually worried about what's coming next. When am I going to be able to travel again? What's happening with the vaccine? When are my kids going to be able to return to school? When is life going to return back to normal? and understand that both of these thought patterns are fear-based. And when you're operating from fear, your levels of stress hormone like cortisol are going to skyrocket. And essentially, that's putting you in fight or flight, which is fine if it's like a short period of time. But when you're in fight or flight chronically, that's going to greatly diminish your immune system and going to cause inflammation to your body on a cellular level. So circling back, thoughts themselves, I don't think are necessarily the most debilitating things, even if they're toxic thoughts. However, in my experience, it's oftentimes the judgment about these thoughts that causes the perpetual pain that we experience. For example, this girl cheated on me, right, 6 years ago, and and I let's say I start thinking about her, like, hey, I wonder why Jordan did that, or hey, I really miss her. And it's like, okay, those are thoughts. Maybe they're normal, maybe they're not, but who's to say if they are or not? Like, it's my life. But then where I start to paralyze myself is like, fuck, like, why can't I get this girl out of my head? What's wrong with me? I have such attachment issues. I can't move on. And you start really letting this one thought like manifest into so much more, rather than just simply bringing awareness and being like, hey, that's interesting. I'm thinking about her again. What lesson can this teach me? What emotions do I experience when I think about this person? So
love that.
Yeah. And you talk about it all the time. I've heard you mention, Brandon, turning triggers into treasures, which I really love, bro. And for me, like for each of these letters, I want to give the listeners an actionable step to take so you can actually implement and be proactive with some of these things we're going to speak about. So number one is stop watching the news. I think a lot of people, especially right now with the election and the pandemic, there's this constant barrage of negativity and all of it's fear-based. And I'm not saying not to be like aware of what's going on, be conscious, especially what's happening in your community. So then you can take the necessary actions, right, to act accordingly. But don't obsess yourself over these things that are so outside of your control. And lastly, for thoughts, I would say create some sort of affirmation before you go to bed, because your first thought in the morning is almost always going to be the same as your last thought at night.
Mm.
So if you're able to make that final thought a positive one that promotes peace and calm, you're likely going to wake up in a state that is peaceful and calm. And I don't think it's, a coincidence. So, one of the things I like to say is just when I'll take some parasympathetic breaths, 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out, and I'll just say I choose calm and clarity over chaos and anxiety. I choose
Mm.
calm and clarity over chaos and anxiety.
Love
And
it.
yeah, and once we realize, like Joe Dispenza says, that thoughts are vocabulary of the brain, we can use that to our advantage. We don't have to let it be like an enemy. We can shift our gene expression by filling ourselves with more reassuring, more positive, more affirmative statements and thoughts. So that's thoughts, and then understanding that those thoughts manifest into feelings and emotions, and then your feelings and emotions are going to dictate your behaviors and your habits, which is letter H. But before I go into H, Brandon, I wanted to see if there's anything you wanted to ask or chime in on about thoughts.
Have good ones. No, that's
Yeah,
great,
yeah.
man. I love everything that you shared there. It all is, it's like realizing, a lot of people let their thoughts rage out of control and sort of, the tail's wagging the dog, if you will. And you don't, once you start to realize like, oh, I can be aware that I'm doing this habitual kind of thinking pattern, which I know you're going into habits next. So we'll hear about that. But, it's like 90% tomorrow is the same as today. And I know Joe Dispenza talks about this. If you want to see shift, what is the routine that you are falling into? And,
Yeah.
and the thoughts are like the most foundational place that's all beginning. Right. And then of course it rolls over into some of the external stuff, which I'm sure you're going to touch on as well. But, yeah, I think the most important thing that comes to mind for me is, we don't just have to idly sit by and watch this, especially if it's a lot of negative thoughts, like it's like watching a train wreck over and over again. It's like, oh,
Mm.
I can, and Abraham talks a lot about this. Esther Hicks, she talks a lot about like reaching for, if you're in a negative spiral and, whatever, you're probably not going to go from, some really challenging momentum into blissed out ecstasy, in 5 seconds, but start reaching for more neutral thoughts, right? Kind of find your way and find something that's more neutral, and slowly you can sort of back away, not going from A to Z, but A to D, right? You just take a little step towards, okay, so what's something that's more neutral, and just starting to take control of the wheel of our lives and our minds, and not letting this thing just rage out of control, like I think happens for a lot of people. And then of course, like Dr. Joe talks about, you then are burning new neural pathways that get stronger and stronger, so they become more you know habitual, and on it goes. But at the end of the day, we can take control of our minds.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's really the message that I want everyone listening to take home with them today, is like, you literally are, Brandon just turned in his book, his final edits to get published. I think you said on January 5th. Like, you are the author of your own book, of your own story. And yeah, maybe you were filled with some stories that didn't serve you, that you accepted as truths, but understand that you can always reshift and realign and change that story that you tell yourself. So,
Yep.
habits are something that I think people, like, when they hear habits, they like cringe. They're like, "Ugh, fucking habits, bro." Like we're going to talk about habits. And the way that I want to present habits is actually especially in the spiritual world, what I found is like, and I don't want anyone taking this the wrong way, because I consider myself very spiritual, but a lot of times in the spiritual world, there's a lack of structure and a lack of action. So there's a
Mm,
lot of flow and a lot of this and a lot of that, which is beautiful, right?
I'm so
But
with you on that.
yeah, but like ultimately, if Brandon and I want to make the biggest impact in the world that we're capable of doing, like we can't just sit idly by and be like, hey, the universe is going to make it happen. Like we actually have to take action and create systems. And I like to think of systems as something that actually allow us to experience more spontaneity, because habits are just mental solutions that conserve energy,
Mm,
and they reduce your cognitive load. If you think about what habits you have in your life right now, whether it's making your bed, brushing your teeth, drinking a big glass of lemon water in the morning, smoking, drinking, swerving and cutting someone off when you're upset, whatever those things are, like they're second nature, they're automatic. You don't even think about them, right? That's the idea with a habit, is you establish these things and they become second nature, so you don't have to waste time thinking about them. You can use your
right.
cognitive load for the actual decisions that are going to impact your family, impact your business, impact your community, right? And I think a lot of people are kind of just riding the wave, which I am too, but there also has to be a level of action and accountability. So, you know, my thoughts on habits are that they form on frequency, not time.
Mm,
And I know there's studies out there about how long it takes to develop a habit. College of London says it takes 66 days. Other people say 21 days. I really think it's all about frequency. Like, let's
mm.
commit to doing this each day, and let's treat our love unconditional, and let's treat our commitments with that same unconditional respect. Like, we're going to do these things because we're committed to them. And, again, these are very uh, these are very small. Like, I don't want people thinking like they have to change everything at once, and that's usually what people do, and they don't have long-term success, right? They try waking up at 5 a.m., they try doing CrossFit, going vegan, eliminating sugar, all in the same fucking week. and and
Right.
and again, it's like, okay, cool. That in fact, like if you do that for a week or two, you're going to see results, like probably positive in terms of like your aesthetics. Maybe you lose some pounds, maybe you get a little more toned, whatever it is you desire, but it's not sustainable. And more importantly, that's fucking miserable. Like doing all of these things, like depriving yourself of all of these gifts the world has to offer. So instead of that, like my approach with each person I work with is, because I understand they're type A, I understand they are already very limited with time in terms of like most of them are fathers, they're leaders of companies, of businesses. So I understand I'm not trying to throw a bunch of shit at them. Instead, I want to uh, infuse little habits throughout their day that are actually going to give them small hits of dopamine. And
Mm,
anytime you make progress, forward momentum, no matter how small, you release the powerful neurotransmitter dopamine, and that's going to fuel you for your next habit. And once you continue to see this progress and you build that momentum, that's going to supply you so much intrinsic motivation. And again, I think a lot of people are hunting for motivation. Like, hey, let me listen to Brandon's latest podcast. Let me watch a Tony Robbins video, and all of that's good and well. Like, I
yep.
do both of those things, but it's about depending on them, right?
Yep.
Like if you can't feel inspired or motivated without those things, then we have to address what's happening
Mm-hmm.
internally, intrinsically inside of you. And um, I think this idea of habit stacking is powerful. So my 12-week program, it's like we'll start with a couple things week one. Once I see that there's that level of accountability and there's that buy-in and that mutual trust of co-creation, then it's like, okay, like now it starts getting fun. What can we add? What can we add? And it's like, if you instill, one habit, positive habit, no matter how small, or you remove something, maybe it's getting super triggered and like acting emotionally in that moment rather than like taking a couple breaths, right? So this goes with adding habits or removing toxic habits that don't serve you. If you do one of those every week, I mean, 2021 is going to be a magical year for you, because that's 52 new actions that you've adopted that are creating more alignment in your life.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good way to a lot of times people, try and bite off, eat the whole elephant in one sitting. And it doesn't work. It's just like making those little shifts. It's like if you look at something, anything, and you make a little shift in the trajectory of let's say it's going to shoot a missile from where I'm at to where you're at, and you make a little, like slightly, 1 degree to the right, it's going to end up somewhere totally different. And so, because over time, it makes that it adds up and exponentially sort of, expands. So I think that's important. A lot of times people think that they need to do so much at once, and it's like, oh no, 1 degree shift is going to, I like what you said, frequency is going to then stack and grow, and it turns into that, exponential kind of growth.
Yeah, Brendan, I'm curious. And I know I'm going to have you on my show later on, but I'm curious, like, is there one habit that maybe you adopted in 2020 that stands out that really impacted you in a
Yeah.
positive way?
Yeah, yeah. In 2020, I started doing breath work regularly. And I mean, I'd done it before 2020, but really like, at least 3 times a week for the second half anyway. Over the last few months, especially more and more frequently. And I found, talk about a habit, a lot of people have habits to change their brain state and to get high, right? And meanwhile, we've got the greatest pharmacy ever made inside of our heads. And what's so great about breath work is it's just vitalizing every cell of your being with oxygen, flooding, the rule of 3 says we can go like what, like, and this is generally speaking, like 30 days without food, three, what is it? 30, I think it's 30 days without food, 3 days without water, and 3 minutes without air. And yet oxygen's the only thing that's still completely free. So I think it's a real sign of our abundance when we are, taking these shallow breaths and not getting enough oxygen to our system, which, we're breathing each moment is, birth. If you take birth and death and mash them up, it's breath, right? And that is we're literally like, that is the lifeline between the worlds. And so, yeah, long answer short. I have started doing breath work in the last 3-4 months, especially, and it's been so empowering, and just like you get such a natural high, and it's just good on all levels.
Yeah, I love that, bro. And you also mentioned it too, like it's free.
Yeah.
These are most of the best drugs in life are actually free, whether that's sunshine, water, community, and some of these things maybe we actually take for granted that we have access to them, right? But these are the things that are really going to be the biggest movers forward for us in our health and in our longevity.
Totally. Absolutely. So what's the next? What's R stand for?
So we have thoughts, we have habits, and R is for relationships. Um, And I'm going to go through these like pretty quickly because I do want to respect your time, and I do want to be as succinct as possible. Your
Uh-huh.
listeners are highly educated. This isn't their first time hearing about the importance of these things. Um, so relationships, right? And I know everyone listening knows the importance of relationships, and really aligning with those people that fill your cup up, right? I think a lot of people surround themselves unintentionally, maybe, with energy vampires, people
Right.
who are detracting value from them, or just not serving them. They're not the core values and vision aren't aligned. And it's something that you mentioned too in one of your videos, which was amazing. Like, it really struck a chord with me, is that complaining complaining and the fact that complaining actually shrinks your hippocampus, and your
Right.
hippocampus is responsible for your memories, right? And
Right.
the reason that's related to relationships is because if you're with someone who's constantly complaining and talking shit about people behind their back, well, guess what, they're probably talking shit about you too behind your
Right.
back. so
Right.
so it's like, so understand, this is the most important thing with relationships. It all starts with you. And, I always gift people The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz, because I think it's a
Ah,
beautiful start and a beautiful guide on how to, like, a beautiful like path and roadmap how to actually achieve self-love. And look yourself in the mirror and just be honest with yourself. Be real with yourself. Like, how are you showing up in the world? And that is the energy, that's the vibration that you're going to attract in your life. And something that I encourage people to do as we get to the end of 2020, very simple, is just evaluate, what are your core values? Is it trust? Is it gratitude? Is it adventure? Is it empathy? And get clear with those, because guess what? When you start to get clear and embody those things, you're going to attract people who also value those things as well. And then lastly, with relationships, and just an exercise people can do is like, take an audit right now with like the 5 people you spend the most time with, and really like an honest assessment, like, hey, like, how does it feel when you're done hanging out with that person, or done having a Zoom happy hour with that person, whatever it is, right? 2020 has presented all weird types of shit, but after an interaction, like, assess, hey, how do I feel after conversing with that person? Like, me and Brandon speaking now, like, you guys can probably tell in my voice, I'm uplifted, I'm inspired, like, I feel good, I feel energized. Amazing. All right, I want more Brandon in my life, you know um so when it comes to relationships, just get real with yourself and understand that however you're showing up, that's what you're going to attract. And like Brandon said many times, understand that you're worthy of great relationships, abundant relationships, both romantic relationships and just friends. So see how you're showing up in the world, assess yourself, and take some time to do this. Like, I really can't stress that enough. Open up a blank piece of paper and do some of these exercises we're talking about.
yeah. Yeah. I think you touched on something really important. I mean, a lot of things that are great. And I thought about the Eleanor Roosevelt, I believe it's Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, great people, great minds talk about ideas, average minds talk about events, small minds talk about people. And so if you're getting caught up in any sort of relationship that is, all about what's wrong with others, gossiping, what's wrong with the world, how can you start to shift those relationships by not, steering the conversation? And it doesn't mean you need to chastise anyone for their own habits or bad habits that maybe you even contributed to and played a part in. It's like, love yourself where you're at, love them where they're at, and focus your energy elsewhere and steer it elsewhere. And if it necessary, steer yourself out of that, you know, connecting with that person if that's where they're insisting that it goes. But I think that's a really foundational part of relationships to sort of like everyone can relate to having that sort of level of relationship. And there's a lot as far as actionable things that we can do to start to shift that.
100%, bro. Yeah. And it's just, again, I'm glad we're doing this show when we are, because symbolically, a lot of people tend to do these audits and evaluations of themselves at the end of the year. And in my opinion, it should be way more often. It should be really every day, like just assessing how you're showing up, what's going well, what's not going well, what needs to improve. But yeah, like you said, your relationships, I've seen people, in Miami, and clients I've worked with who had all the things. They had the yachts, they had the house in Bora Bora and the penthouse and the Rolls Royce, but they didn't have anyone to share it with. Like,
Yeah.
what good is life if you have all these things, you have all you have this abundance of money, but like you're by yourself?
Right.
Fuck that, man.
Miserable.
Yeah.
It's like being rich and being miserable in a better part of town. In a
Exactly.
nicer house or whatever.
Yeah, brother. And in regards to I, so we have thoughts, habits, relationships. I is intention, which again, I know you've also taken a lot of time to speak about thoughtfully on this show. So real quick, I think what makes intention really powerful is that it gives you a guide on what to do, and more importantly, like what not to do. And when you gain clarity on what you want to create, it makes it very easy to eliminate certain behaviors and ways of being. So, perfect. This is honestly, I can't stress this enough. Like, such a perfect time that we're doing this, because let's say you're about to go spend time with family, right? And for the holidays, and you love them, but they trigger you, and you want this to be like the most peaceful, progressive time together, right? So a great exercise to do is literally getting clear with things like your intention. So Joe Dispenza has a great way of setting intention, which really matches your heart coherence with your brain coherence. But essentially, it's like, make a list of the things that you want to do. So this could be, hey, I want to go on a morning walk with my parents for 30 minutes each morning while I'm back visiting. Or I want to have, play a board game each night. These are actionable steps. And then with each of those actions, match it up with an emotion that you want to experience. So that can be connection, that can be non-judgment, that can be unconditional love, it can be gratitude. But I think if we can go into these scenarios and situations with a little more clarity on actually how we want to show up, then we're going to be able to manifest that reality. And it just takes a little time. It just takes a little bit of intention.
Yeah, I love that. I hadn't heard that before, but it's such a great way to touch back on what we were talking about earlier, which is, have a process. And yeah, really, really cool.
Yeah, brother. It's like intentions kind of, and it sounds like it might sound woo woo, but it's basically like your inner compass, right? I mean, you set intention every morning. You can do it before podcasting. I always set intention. I'm like, okay, I am going to be single tasking on this conversation. I am solely focused on, really building rapport and building connection and listening and being open-minded. And it provides a more powerful, meaningful experience, because now I know what I'm not going to be doing. I'm not going to be checking other things on the internet. I'm not going to be drifting off. I'm going to be solely focused and dialed into me and in this case, Brandon. So we'll finish up with the last two. So V, vitality. A lot of the people that I've worked with, they're anywhere from 35 to 45, 50 years old, and they start to
Mhm.
see those dips in energy. And a lot of times this is a product of shitty habits, eating, sitting for a majority of their day, and sitting indoors, honestly, which a lot of people are doing right now, because understand, like, sunlight is one of the biggest drivers for, first of all, obviously, vitamin D, but that also is a precursor for other things like serotonin. And it also helps with testosterone production, which,
Mm.
especially as men, is important. So
Sure.
so I like to think of energy as abundant, never ending. However, it's the focused energy that I want to focus on, especially with the people that I'm working with, because they have big dreams. They're already doing big things, and they have a lot of different things to juggle, right? And you can't do that accordingly. You can't make a huge impact in the world. You can't create something special without good energy levels. And
Yeah.
and like you said, through breath work, through movement, through what you eat, through your sleep, and through purpose, right? I think purpose is the ultimate fuel for this journey through life. So it kind of all comes full circle, Brandon, because we talked about habits to feed our energy levels. We talked about, once we elevate those energy levels, we're able to really free our body from some of the chains of the past and some of those emotions that have kept us anchored down. So I'm happy to dive deeper into this if you want, but I really think it's important for people to kind of look into their morning and evening routines. Like, how are you
Hmm.
starting each day and how are you winding down each day? Um, because especially now, the work life has been so blurred with the home life. And I know you've had some late nights editing, but like,
Yep.
I see this with myself as well. It's like there's days where I gravitate right towards my work at 6:30 in the morning, rather than like going through my stoicism, my breath work, my intention setting. And because there's no 9 to 5, and with what you and I do, there is no 9 to 5 anyways, but it's like,
Yep.
okay, well, when does the day end? Right. And
Yeah.
and what time should I start working? And I'm speaking in the voice of my clients now, but I think it's really important to hone in on some of these practices in the morning and evening to really bookend your day in powerful ways. And I'm
Yeah.
happy to dive into like more specific ones. If we have time, totally up to you.
Well, I'll just add, you asked what was a 2020 habit that I formed, and the other was making sure I'm getting proper sun. As someone who's like super fair skinned, I've always like avoided the sun a lot, and it kind of occurred to me in this year, like that's not really the path. And so I started. There's actually a Purium product called Super Xanthan that supposedly helps to block the harmful, UV rays and everything. So I'll take Super Xanthan and go in at least 30 minutes, um, where I'm full sun exposure. And wow, has that helped so much with energy and vitality and just my skin and, all the things. And so, and it's so simple, right? I mean, it's just you're getting a taste of nature simultaneously. It's like these things, these little things, I think a lot of times people think they've got to do such big, big things. And it's like, go, get in your underwear and go sit in the sun for 30 minutes. See what that does. And it's just really, like you said, it's like once you start doing some of these simple things, it's like, why wasn't I doing this? Why wasn't I focusing on, you know, getting high off my own supply and, the other, infinitely abundant breath and air and oxygen that's here. And, these simple things are just so, it's like back to the basics, right?
100%, brother. Yeah, and that's also really important what you said about the sun. And again, like, I'm used to, as a type A high performer myself and someone who works with those type of people, I'm all about finding ways to optimize time and making time work for us, and how can we be efficient, right? And without like feeling rushed, which I think is kind of like a beautiful space to be, where you're being able to get a lot done without, in a short period of time, without like feeling like you're half-assing things. So if you are getting that morning dose of sunshine, like do some stretching, or
Yep.
take a couple deep breaths, or journal. Bring your high quality spring water out there and hydrate. So you're doing, 3 or 4 beneficial things if you're barefoot and you're earthing and grounding, 4 special things all at once. And
Yep.
your phone's going to be on airplane mode during this. So you're disconnected and you're making love to the present moment. So five things. I mean, there's just so much bang for your buck with what you just said.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like the way you just broke it down. That's definitely a lot of goodness and packed in in a short time period that's not overly challenging to execute, right?
Yeah. And I think that's important too, is finding things that have very low barriers to entry, where it's like, hey, you're traveling to Montana for the week. Cool. It's not going to change anything. You can still do all these things.
Yeah.
None of my stuff that I personally do with my students, with my clients, like involves anything outside of them. I provide all of the supplements, the blue light blocking glasses, all of the tools they need in the 12 weeks, right off the bat. And all of the movements we do, which are customized for their body and their limitations and their asymmetries and imbalances, are all body weight. So there really is no excuse. And then Brandon, do you want to take a guess? Well, you might actually know. So we have thoughts, habits,
Enthusiasm.
yes, you got it. Intention, vitality, and enthusiasm. And Ralph Waldo Emerson, I believe it was, said that nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. And I think of that as being very true. Enthusiasm is what enrolls people into your vision. And
Yeah.
as someone who works with a lot of CEOs and founders who want to attract the best talent to their team, enthusiasm is really a gateway to creating that culture that they so desperately want to. And the great thing about enthusiasm that I found, Brandon, and this really became magnified after that first ayahuasca experience, was enthusiasm's contagious.
I
Like,
was just about to say it. Super contagious.
people are gravitated towards it, especially, and assuming it's coming from a very authentic place, but enthusiasm is a very powerful energy. And when it comes down to it, you listen to Brandon's podcast, yeah, because there's great content, great guests, but also because you dig his energy. You feel aligned to his enthusiasm, right? And people are going to be attracted to passion, to enthusiasm. And it's also a sign that you are living in Dharma, like that you're embodying that, right? That soul's purpose that you're enthusiastic about. Because it's hard to, if you and I were hosting podcasts about, classic cars or, real estate in South Carolina, I mean, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be passionate or knowledgeable or enthusiastic about either of those things.
It's funny that you say that, because my grandfather, well, he's passed now, but he lived in South Carolina, and his brother has a classic car museum in North Carolina, like a huge classic car. Totally.
Wow, that's actually wild, because talk about
Cool
synchronicity. So I just might have given you an idea for your next podcast.
Yeah.
So So yeah, I think a lot of our success collectively has been a product of our enthusiasm for life and helping people and impacting people in a positive way. And I think that's what we need more than ever right now, is just enthusiastic leaders to continue sharing that positive light. And I know I spoke a lot. So quick recap: we have T for thoughts, H for habits, R for relationships, I for intention, V for vitality, and E for enthusiasm.
Love it, love it, love it, man. That's so good. It's so thorough. Your intention is very much felt. You know, it's like it's obviously you're super passionate, and it's funny because I just found out I'm going to be on a list of um, 12 books to read if you want to go from surviving to thriving in 2021, because of course that's what the Golden Key is about. Is you know modern alchemy to unlock infinite abundance. So we're closely aligned, and yeah, very very cool. I love it.
Dude, yeah. And we are so aligned, which is why I was so excited to, make this happen. And again, brother, I'm super grateful for the opportunity to connect with you and share energy with your incredible community. And I hope this touches at least one life. And um, I
For
something that I like
sure.
to encourage on my show is like if you did get a divine download from this show and something that you're going to implement and take action on, like let Brandon and I know.
Yeah.
Tag us on your story on Instagram. I'm at Coach Jeremy 305. And Brandon, you're optimistic with an O, right? Or a zero.
Optimistic with a zero. Yeah, a zero. And then the mystic is with a Y. So, you know, saying it out loud is not necessarily as easy as, a 4-letter, 3-letter word that you spell correctly. It's like a double-edged sword because I always want to like spell things in a funky way. In this case, the regular optimistic was, I think, taken, but I really like it with the zero, PTIMYSTIC. So, yep. And by the way, let me just throw out why I'm thinking of it, because some of you guys listening haven't heard about that I'm gifting that book, The Golden Key, as well. And you can register to get that at goldenkey.gift. And yeah, and as far as connecting with Jeremy, now I haven't even been over to see some of your TikToks. I imagine you do similar things on Instagram though, right? You cross share the same.
Yes, but TikTok, you'll just get it at a much deeper level. So like
Cool.
I post more often on TikTok, and I also do more goofy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If there's like a TikTok trend, I also do. I've been starting to do more stuff with my parents. Like people love seeing my mom and dad like in my videos. So
That's
um,
awesome.
yeah, and honestly, it was kind of surprising to me. On TikTok, I posted a video about microdosing and some of the benefits to it, and it got over 1 million views. And
Wow.
and so many people from that point like started messaging me and telling me their story about, I've suffered with ADHD, anxiety, depression, PTSD for years and nothing has worked. And there's so many people who are just seeking that healing and that holistic healing. So I feel very called to support people on that journey.
Wow.
And yeah, so definitely, check out my TikTok, my Instagram. It's the same handle. It's Coach Jeremy 305. And I also have the Thrive University podcast, which Brandon is coming on now. So I'm really excited for you guys to just continue your evolution, your growth. And I want to be a part of that and support you on this journey. So if you feel called to message me, please do, and we can continue the conversation.
Cool. Yeah. Before we go here, I do want to. Well, I don't want to let you off the hook without a synchronicity story. So hopefully you got, as the listeners know, I love story of synchronicity or serendipity or positive paranormal story. Hopefully you got something fun to share.
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, so let's see, synchronicity story. Let's talk about this girl that I mentioned, Laura,
Uh-huh.
that recently just visited right after my most recent ayahuasca week-long journey in Mexico. And like maybe 2 weeks after, she came to stay with me in California as I was like processing this, integrating this, talking to my mom, right? So that whole experience was pretty synchronized. But the whole story of how I met Laura too is pretty interesting, because it was 2 years ago. it was the summer of 2019 in Ibiza, of all places. And I
Hmm.
actually signed up for this boat party. And I was going on the boat party. Like I signed up with these two girls I had met. So I'm walking there to like meet up with the group. And I see this girl, Laura, and I'm like, damn, she is gorgeous. Like,
Hmm.
and I basically forgot about the girls I was with, like intentionally. And so I was just like, I'm just gonna go for it. And uh we just really connected. And you know, I ended up after that going to Paris with her for like a super romantic 36 hours and then staying at her house in Belgium for a week. And then kind of thought like that might be the end of it. You know, she lives in Belgium, I'm in
Yeah.
Miami, you know, like we're on our different paths or separate journeys. And she visited me in Miami last year, like in December, exactly a year ago. And again, we had a great week together, but just thought it was going to be like one of those things that was like fun travel buddy, you know, who we can share intimacy together. And then this most recent trip to California was, I feel like, just at the perfect time where I feel like I had reached a level of awareness that I wanted to manifest like a deeper connection with the divine feminine. And she's like beautiful, I guess. Uh,
Emanation of the divine feminine.
exactly. And so that whole experience, like coming full circle, where it was like her coming to visit as I'm in this process of trying to receive from the divine feminine and working through this stuff with my mom,
Yeah.
and you know, trying to like eh, create this experience for her to show her California. And it was like it went so smoothly. You know, I couldn't have imagined it gone any better. Like my parents and her got along super well. And so I guess the reason I'm sharing that one is because I feel like a lot of times, whether it's with love or whether it's our career or whatever the avenue is maybe we've ruled out the possibility of this thing actually being able to work and happen. And I certainly did in this
Yeah.
case. And most recently, like I'm actually, you know, open to the possibility, like, hey, you know, it's just distance, like it's just this perceived thing that's supposed to stop things from flourishing. Like, no, I'm gonna go visit her in Amsterdam in February, and then who knows, like who knows what's possible after that. So it's just I think refreshing for anyone listening who thinks maybe they want something or they desire something that they don't feel is tangible or they don't feel like they can make happen. And I just want to let you know it is possible. um yeah, it
Yeah.
is. And 2021 is going to be the year that we tap into all of these possibilities.
I love that. I love that perspective. And yeah, impossible. If you break it down, says I'm possible. And I think 2021 is there's no better time to be, calling in these stretch goals, if you will, um, than coming out of the COVID chrysalis into, really a new world that we're seeing. I think just birthing pains of coming into being. But I suppose that's a conversation for a whole nother podcast. And this has been really awesome. I do have one final question to ask you, Jeremy. My last cliche question, it is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Jeremy Abramson?
Oof, damn, bro, you hit me with that heavy question unexpectedly. So I believe that the meaning of life is to discover your superpowers and unique gifts and become confident in expressing those authentically and empowering others to do the same, and sharing your gifts with the world, because ultimately I truly believe, Brandon, that we each have something, no matter how small it may seem, that is unique to us. And by sharing that thing, we are amplifying the collective consciousness. And by shunning that thing, we're being selfish, and we're hiding this extremely valuable gift from other people. And I think the meaning of life is everyone stepping into their power and purpose and co-creating this beautiful, abundant, magical world.
And so it is. Thank you for helping to usher it in. Jeremy, you are definitely an enthusiastic light. And I'm sure we'll be seeing and hearing a lot more from you. And all of you out there listening, thanks for tuning in your beautiful brainwaves. Until next time, everyone, journey well.
Peace.
Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you about the game with the universe on our website. You can choose the first number that comes to your mind, and it'll pull up that episode number of the podcast. I've been saying this is a great way to co-create synchronicity and magic with your higher self for quite some time. And if you go to positivehead.com/universe, there is a super fun and simple interface to play this game with your higher self. I firmly believe just by setting the intention to play in this way, it opens up the door for magic, and it's a synchronistic way to hone in on nuggets of wisdom out of the huge catalog of episodes that are specifically appropriate for you at this time in your journey to becoming the next greatest and greatest version of yourself. And it also makes for a super fun way to spark the curiosity of friends and family by having them choose a number, so they'll hopefully go and check out their number as well, which I greatly appreciate because it helps us to spread the word about the podcast. Once again, the address is positivehead.com/universe. And as a quick reminder, if you're curious to learn more about Purium superfoods and why I take them almost every day, be sure to also check out positivehead.com/transformation. On this journey of becoming the next greatest and grandest version of ourselves that we have all embarked upon, I cannot stress the importance of managing your physical vibration enough. And quite honestly, Purium has put together the simplest plan I've found to do so. I have my favorite, the appleberry shake, at least 5 times a week. Once again, to learn more about the Purium transformation, go to positivehead.com/transformation. Or if you want to keep it simple and just try out my favorite, the appleberry shake, you can go straight over to ishoppurium.com and be sure to use code positivehead for 25% off. I'll spell that for you. It's ishoppurium.com. And be sure to use your Positive Head 25% coupon code.